Good afternoon or good morning. Welcome to our webinar today, Becoming a Technical Service Provider for the National Resources Conservation Service and Introduction. Hello, my name is Jeff Shazinski, and I am with the National Center for Appropriate Technology, who is assisting in broadcasting this webinar. NCAT is one of 11 organizations who have joined with the Natural Resources Conservation Service in the 3-year National Conservation Innovation Project that is working to better integrate sustainable and organic agriculture production systems into NRCS programs and procedures. This is the first in a series of webinars on becoming a technical service provider, or TSP. The next webinar will be on November 15th, that's only a couple of weeks, featuring Katie Green of the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, which will offer in-depth discussion of TSP topics and specifically on how to develop conservation activity plans for organic production systems. Then Harriet Behar will return for more training on TSP work in January of 2013 with a virtual tour of organic farm conservation activity planning. Finally, Joanne Baumgartner with the Wild Farm Alliance will end this series with a discussion of how NRCS TSPs can support biodiversity conservation in organic systems sometime late in spring of 2013. If you didn't get those times or dates, they will be presented at the end of this webinar so you can get them down again. Copies of all the trainings, and today's included, will be available on our ATTRA National Sustainable Agriculture website at www.attra.ncat.org. And you can always email or phone the presenters today, as well as contact our 1-800 hotline at the ATTRA project, which is 1-800-346-9140. And again, these will be posted at the end of the webinar today. It's important as we proceed to use your chat box there and send questions in. We encourage you to type those questions in. You won't be able to verbally do it, but we will be tracking them as you go along, and I'll be collecting them, kind of summarizing them, and we'll try to answer as many as we can. The presentation is about an hour, hopefully a little less or more, so if you want to hang in for questions, it might be about an hour 20 minutes. But we'll try to get as many questions as we have time for. And also at the webinar, as we come down, there will be a short evaluation that will come up. Please help us make these webinars better by providing your feedback. It's not a very long feedback, just quickly answer those questions and it will help us a great deal. The 11 organizations who are joining with NRCS and NCAT in this effort are the Center for Rural Affairs, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition, the Midwest Organic and Sustainable Education Service, Organic Farming Research Foundation, Virginia Association for Biological Farming, the Florida Organic Growers, Kansas Rural Center, the Wild Farm Alliance, and the Land Stewardship Project, and finally the Practical Farmers of Iowa. Today's presenter will be Harriet Behar with the Midwest Organic and Sustainable Education Service, or better known as MOSES. Harriet has been an organic specialist with MOSES for over 10 years, especially in many topics related to organic agriculture. She's also been an organic inspector for almost 20 years, and she's also an organic farmer. And she's currently farming in Gay Mills, Wisconsin, where she's actually giving the webinar today. Finally, joining us today, perhaps, we're not sure because of the storm in Washington, maybe Dana Larson, who is the member of the National TSP team in Washington, D.C., and she certifies TSPs in the Western region. She is on. We just found out she's been having a hard time moving around with the big storm in the Northeast. She had a hard time getting back to Washington, D.C., so we weren't sure. So anyway, Harriet, I'll let you start, and we'll get back together with questions at the end.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. And I'm very gratified to know that there's so many of you interested in becoming technical service providers to help organic producers address conservation concerns on their farms. So this webinar will have quite a few acronyms since you will be interacting with the Natural Resources Conservation Service otherwise known as the NRCS. And those of you who are involved in organic agriculture also know that we're very full of acronyms. So I will repeat a few times the actual words, and then I'm going to move into acronym speak just to make things go a little faster. So a TSP is a technical service provider, and then I'm going to be talking about the Conservation Activity Plan, CAP 138, and then, of course, the NRCS. Next slide. So the NRCS is an agency within the USDA that has a variety of programs that work with landowners, both farmers and forest owners, that promote conservation and land stewardship. Next slide. A technical service provider, or TSP, can be an individual, a company, or local, state, or federal agencies, as long as they're not part of the NRCS, that can provide technical assistance to farmers who've been approved by the NRCS to receive cost-share funds for a wide variety of conservation improvements to their farms. And so someone who is a TSP would be need to be approved by the NRCS and show that they've met a certain level of skill and expertise in order to receive payment through the farmer for these cost-share activities. And so who can be a TSP to write this conservation or activity plan for the transition to organic, or it's number 138. Those who have knowledge about organic agriculture is very important, and those who also have knowledge of conservation concerns on working land. You can be an organic inspector, an organic farmer, a crop consultant. You can be any type of conservation professional, either private or government, and you can be an employee of an NGO, as long as you have that knowledge of conservation and organic. Next slide. So this CAP 138, or the Transition to Organic Conservation Activity Plan, is part of the EQIP program under NRCS, and that stands for Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This program encourages farmers to put new practices on their farms. So if they're already doing something, they can't get funding to continue doing that practice under EQIP. This is for new things. And so this Conservation Activity Plan is for farmers who are transitioning land to organic. This is something new that they're doing. EQIP also provides cost share on a wide variety of practices, from grazing to irrigation to things that mitigate soil erosion on their farms. These practice standards are national in scope, but each state offers a selection of the federally offered standards. They may choose all of them, they may choose only 2/3 of them, and that will go state by state, and I'll show you how to figure that one out. And they can actually even tweak them just a little bit on a state-by-state level. So it's always good to really look at the practice standards being offered by each state that you might be working in as a TSP. The practices may change yearly of what the state offers under the EQIP program, and the dollars provided is approximately 75% of the cost to the farmer. So the farmer has an investment in doing these items as well. Next slide. So some of the practice standards that a farmer might participate or ask for cost share would be nutrient management planning. There's a practice standard called conservation crop rotation, which encourages farmers to move away from continuous row crops. And of course, if they're transitioning to organic, that would be something they would look to do, include a legume or a small grain in their crop rotation. Prescribed grazing, so they offer grazing specialists and a whole variety of practices that would help people move from a single pasture to a rotational grazing type operation. Irrigation also is offered. Again, it's state by state, and cover cropping, which of course is a foundational activity on organic farms. So the farmer may not know much about any of these things and may be reaching out for technical assistance on these practices. Next slide. The conservation activity plans are basically the first step that a farmer might do when they are moving to something new on their farm, to kind of get an overview, a holistic overview of their farm, to see what are the priority conservation concerns on their farm, and what type of practices and in what sequence they might do to meet those conservation concerns. A conservation activity plan will review all aspects of the farm. So if they're only looking at transitioning their croplands, you still might also look at their livestock operations, see if there's any conservation concerns, let's say with their barnyard and runoff from there, those sorts of things. So it's not just only looking at the organic part of the farm, but really seeing the farm as a whole organism. And for the CAP 138, farmers are provided with that technical expertise in both overseeing their conservation concerns as well as organic production requirements. Next slide. So the NRCS has offered this organic CAP 138 for the past 4 years. At first, not all the states offered it, but it has been offered in all states for the past 2 years. Right now, there are less than 15 technical service providers nationwide to write these conservation activity plans, and there is really a large demand. Next slide. For those of you that are not that versed on organic, you get a viewpoint here of really where the concentrations of organic farms are, but you can also see that there's organic farms in every state. And so there would be a demand maybe heavier on the West Coast, the upper Midwest, and the Northeast. But even if you're sitting in Georgia, there would be a need for people to write these plans. And this map is actually from 2007. And you can see then again, if you have expertise in vegetables or dairy or orchards, you know, where the concentrations are there. Next slide. So the organic regulations mandate that the natural resources on the farm are maintained or improved while they are under the organic regulation and they're selling their crops as organic. And the definition of natural resources include the physical, hydrological, and biological features, including soil, water, wetlands, woodlands, and wildlife. And those of you that are involved in organic know that there are questions about biodiversity and protection of natural resources when you're doing your organic inspection. And so learning more about conservation concerns and how they can be met through various practices also helps organic inspectors be better at their job, as well as, of course, offering another income stream by being a TSP. Next slide. So what do people need to do to be a TSP to write an organic CAP? Well, they need to have knowledge of organic system plans and the organic regulation. And I will give you some ideas on how you can do that. They may need to obtain a reference from a certification agency or other known entity that's knowledgeable about the National Organic Program. There I am with another acronym, stating that they meet that first criteria. And in order to receive payment from the NRCS to do these CAPs, which the payments come through the farmer, so but you need to be an approved TSP in order for the farmer to be able to get payment from the NRCS. You need to complete a variety of online training modules, become familiar with the NRCS National Planning Procedures Handbook and NRCS practice standards. And this webinar will take you through how to do those. The other thing is there are in-person trainings offered by states providing a more in-depth review of what it takes to do a farm walkover and really observe and identify conservation concerns and how to write a conservation plan. While this is not mandated by the NRCS, as someone who has taken those courses, I would recommend them highly. Next slide. So to find the National Planning Procedures Handbook, this is the website, and it is extensive, and you can kind of see that it talks about the plan format, planning fundamentals. It's actually a very interesting read and will be very useful to you in helping you when you are doing your farm walkovers and identifying conservation concerns, and will help you understand in what the NRCS is really looking for in what type of information you're providing both to them and to the farmer. Next slide. So various ag professionals, this would be a good choice to become a TSP because at times we are very busy in the middle of summer, but there's no requirement. Typically the contract is a year long, so you can do obviously your farm visit should occur when you can actually view the conservation concerns. There shouldn't be 6 feet of snow or whatever out there, but you can then write your plan when the season kind of slows down a little bit. For those of you that are organic inspectors, the National Organic Program has approved that people can be both TSPs to write these plans as well as organic inspectors, as long as they do not perform an organic inspection on the same farm that they wrote the plan. Then that would not be considered a conflict of interest. And depending on the certifier's administrative manuals, the time between your writing of the plan and possibly being able to do an organic inspection could be anywhere from 1 year to 3 years. Next slide. So to become a TSP, it can be very beneficial for the organic inspector to see the farm from a conservation point of view. The other thing is that this really helps farmers with their transition to organic. For those of you that are organic inspectors, you know that that first inspection can be somewhat intimidating for people who don't necessarily really understand the regulations. But if they've had a TSP really help them understand those regulations, it goes a lot easier. They really understand organic as well as conservation by the time they've had this consultant on their farm. It can be very rewarding to be able to use your knowledge of organics in a positive way because you will be a consultant, so you'll be able to be helpful, which is a different activity than what you do as an organic inspector. You're really not allowed to be giving suggestions and advice, but this is where you would be able to do that. The other thing is, if you don't have background in organic, there is a rapidly growing clientele that are doing organic agriculture, and so if you obtain some of that organic knowledge, you then expand your customer base. Next slide. So the NRCS at this time will pay between $1,500 and $1,800, depending on the situation, if it's a beginning farmer or a socially disadvantaged farmer, or if there's some extra travel involved, then you can get more of the higher payment. And to write the complete cap, typically you need to at least make one farm visit, but you might need to make a second one just to finalize that proposed conservation plan, because the farmer should have buy-in to that plan. You maybe could even do that via the phone, but sometimes it's good just to go there in person and visit with that farmer and finalize exactly what they're going to do. So the plan will identify conservation concerns as well as NRCS practices that might be used to address those concerns. And there may be numerous of those practices that are useful in their transition to organic. So there's going to be some office work as well. When you submit the plan, it needs to have maps, which you will get from the Web Soil Survey. There'll be some topography maps as well. You'll need to be calculating soil loss using the Russell II program or the WEPA TSPs program, which is a wind erosion program. Again, more acronyms. NRCS personnel may be willing to train you to use these tools. I was able to get someone here in Wisconsin who spent some time with me. There are also webinars and manuals available on the internet to help you understand how to use Russell 2. And the Extension and other organizations also provide trainings periodically. And this you can all find out through your state NRCS office if there are any trainings available or if there are anyone available to help you learn more about using these programs. And those are mandated as part of the plan. If you're working on a Mac, you will probably need to go out and get a PC. Luckily, there are inexpensive little PCs that you can get because many of the NRCS programs require the use of Internet Explorer on a PC. And so if you try to access these programs or even some of the NRCS websites using a Mac, you will get very frustrated. So you need to you're going to have to go out and you can even get yourself a little netbook or something, something inexpensive, but it really needs to be on a PC. If during your farm visit you see that the farmer should probably have a nutrient management plan or a grazing plan or a pest management plan, you do not need to do that plan as part of your transition to organic CAP, but you do need to kind of give an overview of why you felt the plan was needed and maybe even some suggestions of areas where that plan could be implemented. So that needs to be in your plan, a reference to a secondary plan that they might choose to do in the future. Next slide. So in order to be CAP 138 TSP, and I hope you're all following my acronyms, you need to be able to conduct farmer interviews in a clear and concise way. And many of you that are ag professionals already have that skill. You need to write clear, concise, and objective reports. And again, many of you already have those skills. And remember that the plan is written for the farmer. So the farmer needs to have buy-in. You're not there just to kind of tell them what to do. You're there to understand what their visions and dreams and goals are for their operation, and then see how NRCS could possibly help them with those goals, as well as their goal of transitioning to organic. But any of the criteria set in that plan still must, if they're going to receive cost share from the NRCS, and you are going to receive NRCS payment through the farmer, it still must meet all the criteria that NRCS provides for those activities. There will be some work with computer programs, so if you're computer savvy, no problem. And the NRCS supplies a template for the report writing, and which will help that report writing go faster, and will also make sure that your plan contains all of the required information. Next slide. So here is available, and you can just Google this, CAP 138 criteria, and you will get this 18-page document which tells you what needs to be in the plan. It's pretty much bulletized, so if you look through here just on this first page, natural resource concerns to be addressed, fertility, soil quality, and erosion and control, things like that. So this will give you some background of what you need to do. Next slide. And then there's a checklist as well that the NRCS will be using to make sure that your plan meets all of the requirements. So then they would then give the information to the farmer, who would then, the money to the farmer, who would then pass it on to you. So this would also make you make sure that you're putting together a complete plan. Next slide. And this is the template that the NRCS has up on their website to help you write your CAP 138. And you can see down there at the bottom, there's the attachments that you need, like the map, the practice standards and the job sheets for those. the soil loss evaluation printouts, that would be from Russell 2 and the wind erosion program, and any other supporting documentation that you might have. Next slide. This is page 2. You can see that it prompts you to give the Russell 2 or the wind erosion printouts, and these fields will all expand when you type into them, so you have a chance to write what fields do not meet the minimum criteria, what are the existing conditions, and you can give a little narrative of what you've seen on the farm. And this is also very useful for the farmer. Next slide. Continuing, there will be more if there's issues with irrigation or organic matter. All of these things are then prompted. If there's no issue, then you just write that down and say, this is not an issue on this farm. But this does prompt you to then have a complete plan. Next slide. So if there's any issues with water quality, degraded plants, and any other resource concerns. Next slide. Then at the very end, you would be working with the farmer to develop plans for each field. And if there's 3 fields that are all being managed the same way, let's say they have contour strips, then you can write, fields 1, 3, and 5 are going to be there's going to be cover crops put on this field, and it totals 27 acres. They're going to be doing fall planted rye in year 2013 and that sort of thing. And then of course, this is where you would then attach the practice standard for cover crops to the report. The areas that are written in light brown, because this is not live, I can't show you, but when you click on that, you actually get a menu which shows all of the NRCS practice standards, so it's very easy for you then to choose that item on the menu, and then it shows up in your report. And then you can also under the organic system plan linkage, choose an item, a menu comes up, and it shows where all of the, which parts of the organic regulation that you are addressing by that practice. And you can see this goes, you have many different fields that you can fill in your plan. Next slide. So, if you haven't been scared off by all the acronyms, I'm still trying to get you to really think about becoming a TSP, because the organic and conservation-minded communities really need you. We are very short on TSPs, and unfortunately, a lot of the current TSPs are really focused more on their specific areas of expertise, like nutrient management or pest management, and they do not have much of a knowledge of organics. And of course, as organic farming continues to grow in the United States, we're seeing a great deficit. So for those of you who don't know much about organic, it'd be a good idea to learn a little more. The other thing is the group that Jeff talked about. We have been working with the NRCS to develop policies and even have made suggestions to the various practice standards to make them more attractive to organic farmers. And so we're going to see more and more organic producers and producers who are transitioning to organic coming into the NRCS offices, looking to work with them on improving their farms. The last thing is that if we don't get more organic knowledgeable TSPs, the NRCS may decide to discontinue them because there aren't any people that can get payments through the NRCS to do these activities. So we don't want that to happen, because we want the organic producers to be able to access these programs. Next slide. So for those of you who don't know much about organic agriculture, there are ways to learn more. There is the International Organic Inspectors Association, and here's their website. They give week-long classes geared to becoming an organic inspector, but it is really the only comprehensive training on the USDA organic regulation and those essential components of the organic system plan. It's very worthwhile. You'll really get a very good working idea of what the organic regulations are and how they are implemented on farms And that, going through that class would definitely meet the criteria for having organic knowledge. Another thing, too, is to attend organic conferences. Every region in the U.S. has them. You can interact with organic farmers, learn more about organic production methods, and if you wanted to find out about those, an organic certification agency in your region would know about those. And then, of course, review the organic regulation on the National Organic Program website. Next slide. So here's the National Organic Program website. You can see under the third bullet there, organic standards, they have the organic regulations. There's a list of the allowed and prohibited substances. There's lots of different, on the fourth bullet, there's an organic certification and accreditation where there's a list of certified operations as well as list of certifying agents. So this is a very useful area to kind of get involved and knowledgeable about organic in the United States. Next slide. So here's when you click on that organic regulations, here it comes up on the electronic Code of Federal Regulations, and so you can read all about the land requirements, soil fertility, and crop nutrients. So just to let you know, it's very accessible and easy to find. Next slide. This is if you would have clicked on the certifying agents. This is by name. You can also search by state. So this has all the contact information for the various certification agencies, and I believe there's about 93 of them, about half of them outside the U.S. that are accredited to certify organic operations. And they would be very knowledgeable as far as, when there are organic conferences or any type of field days that you might be able to attend. Next slide. So part of the organic system plan, which is what else the farmer will need to provide when they become certified, is they have to have documentation of all the practices they do on their farm, all the methods, all the materials used, how they monitor the effectiveness of what they're doing, how they do their record keeping, and how they manage their buffer zones, which are areas between the organic production and any conventional land that might adjoin. Next slide. ATTRA has an organic system plan template, so if you want to see what organic farmers need to have in their organic system plan, you can go there. Each certifier has kind of their own organic system plan template, but the ATTRA one is very comprehensive. It is quite long, but it's got everything. So you can see what's being required of organic farmers, and a lot of it is multiple choice, so it's not that hard for the farmers to go through and complete. Next slide. So, how to become a TSP? Well, the first thing you're going to need to do is contact your state NRCS office, which is in the capital of your state. The other thing, too, is there is an NRCS office in every county in the United States as well. But they would probably just turn you over to the state contact. You're going to then ask for the person at the state office who oversees TSPs, and then you're going to tell them what you want to do, that you want to be approved to write the CAP 138, and they would then put you through the process to become activated so you can access the NRCS training modules on their program, their website called AgLearn. This TSP coordinator in the state will put your name in the system, and then once you've gone through the whole program, if you're approved in your home state, it's typically easier to then become approved in other states. Next slide. As someone who's gone through this, I just have to say to be patient. Just don't try to be multitasking when you're going through any of this. Really pay attention, because you need to read all the instructions thoroughly and follow them to the letter. You need to make sure you check all the boxes when there's questions. If you don't know what to do, contact your state TSP coordinator and have them help you. That's what they're there for. They want to see you become a TSP rather than sitting there and getting frustrated. When you are developing your password, make sure it has no dictionary words, no proper names, or any other recognizable words. I believe it also prompts you to have a capital letter as well as a symbol and a number in there. And make sure you write down your password because it's not going to make any sense to you. And password periodically as well. Next slide. So here's a list and the website for finding all of the TSP coordinators by state. So that's an easy, you can go directly then on the website, find their phone number or their email address, contact them. I didn't give you the full amount, but it goes all the way to the very last state, and I believe even Puerto Rico and Guam and all of that. So it's easy for you to find the person that you need to get a hold of in order to start the process to become a TSP. Next slide. And this is also just a wealth of information. This is the website for people who want to become TSPs. It also has a place where even if you're looking for a TSP, like a landowner might be looking for people who are approved, they can click here and go to the screen and look for people with organic expertise. If you look to, I know it's not the easiest to read, but there's a TSP eligibility criteria, the Conservation Activity Plan or CAP Plan development criteria, the templates, National Plan templates. That's where I got that template for the CAP 138 that I showed you. So there's lots of really good information. And I would say maybe first go here and look things over even before you contact your state TSP coordinator, just so you know what kind of information and resources there are. So then you would click, and when you want to, there's a button there for becoming a TSP. So then there's a step-by-step guide, there's basic instructions, there's troubleshooting for login problems, and believe me, I've had the problems, so I know, but everyone has been very helpful. There's a national helpline, and they've been able to help me go through and make sure that I've got everything right in order to obtain this USDA authentication level 2. And that's what you need to have in order to be able to access AgLearn. Next slide. Here's the basic instructions that would come up in order for you to become authenticated and get into AgLearn. And I would recommend printing this out. It's just a one-page. So as you're going through the process, you can kind of check off what you've done and make sure you've done everything right. So this was linked from that previous slide I showed you. Next slide. So in order to access AgLearn, you have to be approved as a level 2 person by the NRCS. You will go through kind of an application process on their website, and then there'll be a time that I think you have 2 or 3 weeks when you need to go in person to your local NRCS office. I believe you have to bring a picture ID, and then those people complete your activation. And it's a good idea, too, before you just walk into your local NRCS office to call and make sure that the person who knows how to do that will be there when you show up, maybe even make an appointment. And then once you're activated, you're good. And again, make sure you answer all the questions in the online application and write down that password, because you will need to put that in every time you go into AgLearn. Next slide. So, AgLearn, the TSP handout that was previously had some detailed step-by-step instructions how to get in there. If you're having issues, the helpline is responsive. Your TSP coordinator will help with you get in there and make sure that you can see everything. And remember, if you're trying to do it on a Mac, you will not get in. You just need to use a PC. The other thing is that the state NRCS TSP coordinator, typically, or there might even be an education or training person in the NRCS. They will place the needed training modules in your personal learning profile. So everything that you will need to do to be a CAP 138, they will put in there for you. That's why you need to tell them what you want to do. So to go through the modules, this is going to take some time and focus. Just read through them. Each section of the module has its own quizzes, and you can't move on until you take that quiz and you complete it successfully. At the end of the 5 required modules, you'll take another test that covers all 5, and then once you pass successfully, that will be told to the state TSP coordinator, and then they will contact you to help finalize getting you put up on the TSP website so NRCS personnel and landowners know that you are approved for writing the CAP 138 and that you have organic expertise. Next slide. Okay, so next you'll need to review the NRCS Planning Handbook, which I showed you earlier. And it'll probably make a little bit more sense once you go through the modules. And then you do need to do some type of farm visit and write a sample plan. You can write a plan on your own farm or a neighbor's farm. And then that plan will be submitted to the state TSP coordinator, who will then pass it on to the national people. And if it meets their approval, then they will give you a TSP number. You will be listed in your state as being approved, and then you can receive payment through the NRCS. So the system for that is you will write an invoice to the farmer that you're writing the CAP 138 for, and it can be even more than what the farmer is receiving. Supposed to be a 75% cost share, but you can write that invoice for whatever amount you wish. Of course, you have to get agreement from the farmer that they're willing to pay that, and then but the NRCS will not give the farmer like the $1,500 if your invoice is only for $1,000. So they will only pay the farmer based on your invoice. Okay, back to the AgLearn modules. The TSP orientation, they just updated it, and it's been streamlined and been blended together with a different module, which when I took it as a separate one. There's a TSP orientation, kind of helping you through what I've been talking about, as well as the conservation planning. And I've been told that it should take about 2 to 3 hours to complete. Next slide. This is an example of what AgLearn looks like. So they kind of go through what your lessons will be. Next slide. Here's a page on one of the modules. If you see here, this is page 5 of 50. And you do need to go through, this module is about protecting yourself from computer hacking and that sort of thing. And I believe that has to be taken every other year. Okay, the next thing that you need to do is you need to familiarize yourself with those NRCS practice standards. And you can find those on the Field Office Technical Guide or the PHOTOG or the ePHOTOG, because it's all up on the web. So what you'll do is you can Google that, next slide, and it'll come up where you will be asked to click on a state. So you'll go to the state that you work on. Remember I said that each state will offer different practices and might even have a slightly different practice than another state. And then when you click on your state, it'll come up for a county. And so then you click on the county that you'll be working in. Next slide. And then when you get that, there'll be off to the left, there'll be a table of contents. There'll be section 3 has the technical criteria for the conservation activity plans, and then when that is clicked on where the arrows are, there's your transition to organic farming plan, and that's where you can find that original 8-page document that I talked about earlier what the criteria are for writing the CAP 138. Next slide. When you go to Section 4, you will find all of the practice standards. And if you can see, there's conservation practices, and it's got a long menu. And then I scroll down, and in the second screen there's the under cover crops. You can see there's all these folders. When you click on a folder, you'll get the practice standards, and then you'll also get job sheets and other pertinent information for that specific state. And this just happens to be Missouri because I chose Missouri. In Wisconsin, I don't believe we have a job sheet on how to aerial seed cover crops in order to be able to receive cost share for that practice. But so each state will have kind of their own, the practice standards will be very similar, but they might have their own job sheets. So it's important that you look through those and understand those in order to help the farmer understand what they can do on their farm. Next slide. And here is an example of the first page of a practice standard. The practice standards are anywhere from 2 to 5 pages. They talk about the purpose, the criteria, and the practices that have to be done in order to meet and receive cost share payment. Next slide. So the organic farmers can get cost share in order to work with a technical service provider. You might even be working a little bit with the organic certifier, getting, looking at what that certifier might require, let's say for crop rotation or whatever, because there are a little bit differences between certifiers there. The organic farmer will get some help from you to stop using those prohibited inputs and look at doing weed control and fertility management from more of a systems-based approach and using approved inputs under the organic regulation. You can even talk to them about markets. You're there as a consultant. It won't necessarily be part of the plan, but that helps you understand what type of activity the farmer visions for their farm. A lot of specialty market, specialty crop growers are coming into the NRCS offices, especially attracted to the high tunnel that's offered. So it's not going to be just corn and bean or livestock producers. There's going to be a wide range, orchards, small berries, all kinds of things. So there's a whole variety of things that you can help the farmer with and help them with their soil fertility and soil building, resource protection, tillage types. Those are things that you'll be working with when you're doing your Russell II calculations and trying to see how best to mitigate any kind of soil erosion, especially on sloping land. And so you can be very helpful to the farmer. Next slide. Under EQIP, that's the Environmental Quality and Census Program, there have been 2 sign-ups. I don't know what the next Farm Bill is going to offer us, but I believe there will be an organic initiative in 2013 as well, where there are 2 different sign-ups. And the organic producer or transitioning to organic producer can actually sign up in either one. The benefit to them if they sign up under the organic initiative is that there are some higher payments under the organic initiative, especially when it involves buying seed, and that recognizes the higher cost of organic seed. Next slide. So I'm going to go through just a few of the practice standards that organic farmers would be using and you would be putting in your plan for those that are transitioning to organic. And one of them is, a whole variety of them. The NRCS really would like, soil erosion to be mitigated on most of our farms, and there's a whole variety of things that organic farmers can do. The practice standards many times are referred to by number. So there's contour farming, all kinds of contour strips, buffer strips, filter strips, residue management, and grassed waterways that can be done. And of course, under the National Organic Program, this is the rule here that they must maintain or improve the physical, chemical, and biological condition of the soil and minimize soil erosion. The other thing that's also mandated is water conservation. Next slide. For buffer zones, and this is not even all of them, as those of you who are know organic agriculture, that whenever the organic production area adjoins a conventionally managed area where there could be risk of drift, that the organic farmer has to put in a buffer zone area. There's no specific size. But if they put in windbreaks or hedgerows, or even they can put in field borders in that buffer zone where they are growing beneficial insect habitat, pollinator habitat, these can all be benefits to the organic farmer as well as help them meet the organic regulations. And of course, they provide wildlife habitat as well. Next slide. Another thing for pollinator, there's a conservation NRCS practice standard called conservation cover, as well as field border that encourage the planting of either native prairies or just a diverse planting. Depends on the region. Usually it's native plants that encourage pollinator and beneficial insect habitat, as well as those hedgerows. The organic regulations require biodiversity, and organic farmers over time will recognize the value of having that habitat. And it's not only even for insects, but there's been a lot of research done in Iowa, especially on the weed seed predation done by beetles as well as field mice. And so having habitat for wildlife and a diverse ecosystem really does benefit organic farmers. Next slide. Cover crops, which, like I said earlier, is a foundational practice on organic farms, reducing erosion, manage excess nutrients, increasing soil organic matter, promoting biological diversity and life in the soil, including nitrogen fixation with the use of legumes, and also suppressing weeds. All these things can be done. And for the transitioning to organic producer, if they have not been doing cover crops, this might be one of the number one suggestions that you talk to the farmer about as far as incorporating this practice into their farm system. Next slide. Here's the conservation crop rotation, where they, if someone has been doing just continuous row crops, this is going to help them during those transition years receive some payment for transitioning to having a more diverse crop rotation, especially to include perennials. Next slide. For those of you who might be working with livestock producers, if they are ruminants, this is under the organic, they're going to have 30% of the dry matter intake during the grazing season come from grazing. And so this might be one of the most important recommendations that you do. If they have some pastures that are not being used most efficiently, if there's some overgrazing going on, and there's some other ways that they can really manage their pastures as a valuable crop, the prescribed grazing practice standard would really help the farmer improve their system and meet organic regulations. Next slide. There's also other things that could be useful depending if the state that you're working in offers this. There's pipelines that get water out to the grazed livestock, and there's cost share for that. Next slide. There's cost share for watering, for tanks and waterers, troughs. This is a slide from out west. Next slide. For fencing, both exterior and interior fencing can be covered depending on the state, but there are practices for this under the NRCS. So there's many things that the NRCS can be useful. In addition, forage harvest management, in promoting the quality and quantity of forages. And again, for organic farmers, this is essential in having a healthy ruminant herd of any type. Next slide. Oh, nutrient management. Again, you would not have to write a whole nutrient management plan, but if they are applying manure or any type of fertility input, that would be, and they don't have a nutrient management plan, this would be something that would be discussed with the farmer. And some of the issues, especially with organic nutrient management, would be part of your plan. Next slide. There's practice standards for composting, so organic farmers or those transitioning to organic can be encouraged through cost share to set up composting facilities. Next slide. And of course, like I said earlier, there's been a lot of interest. This has been a very popular practice standard and cost share with people around the country on the seasonal high tunnels. And so, you'll be working with specialty crop growers and, working with them on helping them figure out how they can receive cost share, because there are some restrictions on the practice standard on what they can get cost share for under this high tunnel. So you'll be there to help them as a technical advisor. Next slide. The other thing, too, is there's irrigation, erosion, water management. All these things are available, and I would encourage you to look at the Field Office Technical Guide and familiarize yourself with some of these practice standards. And they've got a lot of really good, useful information on helping you understand the conservation concerns that they are addressing. Next slide. So lastly, what are you going to need to do? Well, you're going to have to understand the USDA programs and procedures. I know I threw a lot at you today, but really it's not that hard, and once you start kind of delving into it, it'll all start to make sense. It's good for you to understand the requirements of EQIP and also the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. You're going to need to start learning how to look at a farm as a holistic organism there, and to understand how to address and identify those conservation needs on the farm. And specifically, when you are discussing buffer zones, that would be very useful for those transitioning to organic, and what kind of conservation practices they might be able to put in place that could be beneficial to their operation in those buffer zones. Next slide. So what else you're going to do is that you're going to be looking at erosion, how you can either fix what's already there or prevent future, help with nutrient management, help with pasture management, help with wildlife habitat development, and of course advise on the special provisions such as how they can achieve organic certification. And I believe that's it. Oh, there's one more slide. So further questions, you can get a hold of Jeff Shazinski, and I see I didn't give you my information, but if you want to go to the Moses website, which is mosesorganic, all one word, .org, you can find my contact information there under staff. And thank you for listening, and I believe we have some questions.
Yes, Harriet, we have a lot of questions, and I'm afraid we won't be able to get to every last single one of them. The first thing I want to make sure everyone knows is that this will be up on the ATTRA website, probably this afternoon, but certainly by tomorrow. And that can be accessed on ATTRA by Googling ATTRA and going to the video section. There's a multimedia link, and then it goes to videos, which takes you to all our webinars that are posted there. So you can re-access this this quite easily. And I'll just do one quick question, because we did actually have some international visitors today. The NRCS programs are only for U.S. citizens as well as the TSP program. So there's, unfortunately, the Bolivian, there's no cost share in Bolivia for Bolivian farmers for which they could pay TSP. I'm sorry for that, but that's the reality of the program. But thanks for joining us anyway. There's a lot of questions. The first one I'll start with is, Can an organic TSP do nutrient or pest management plans, not only CAP plans, but these other special plans, and more specifically, as they may or may not relate specifically to organics? Because, as you know, Harriet, nutrient management under organics may be very different, or certainly pest management under organics may be different. So can a TSP also an organic TSP also do those plans?
And the answer to that is absolutely, but you would need to meet the criteria which was on that TSP, that first screen that I showed you. So you'd have to look at those CAP plan criteria, and there will be some trainings that you have to take, or proof of education. So if you've already, let's say you're approved in your state for writing nutrient management plans, well then you could write a nutrient management plan for an organic producer. But having organic expertise opens up more job possibilities for you as a nutrient management planner, because an organic farmer who's coming to the NRCS not for a 138 CAP but for a nutrient management plan would be looking for someone who understands organic agriculture, so the recommendations would meet more what they would be mandated to do on their farm. So you as a TSP can be approved for writing a whole variety of plans, or working with a whole variety of clients on various issues, depending if you have the expertise and are approved by the NRCS to do those plans.
Thanks. This question came up in a fairly different ways, but in general, how long do you think it takes, from beginning to end, to actually become a certified TSP and be on the site? I mean, anyway, just give them some sense of the time investment, I guess.
Okay, so I would say it would take you a couple of days to kind of get yourself into the system, get yourself activated, go through the AgLearn modules. Then the next step would be to review the practice standards. It really depends, how much familiarity you have with the NRCS already. I'm sure some of the people listening, or maybe even former or retired NRCS employees, and so that would not take much time. If you have no familiarity with the practice standards, well, that's going to take, a few days, probably to really kind of read the planning procedures manual, look through the ePhotog and look at the field office training technical guide, look at those practice standards, and then of course you have to go out to a farm and write a plan. And I would say that would take another couple of days. To farm, talk to the farmer, and then go back and work on Russell 2 and develop that. And so writing the plan, it depends, again, how versed you are with Russell 2, how much time it's going to take you to learn that. If you already know how to do that, that's going to be a much easier thing. So I don't know how many, like I said, a couple of days here, a couple of days there. If you were working on it straight, I would say if you really worked at it in somewhere between 5 and 7 days, you could have it all done. If you had no conservation background at all, and you just concentrated on doing that.
Thank you. This may be related to the first question somewhat, but you mentioned CSP at the end. Can, again, a certified TSP organic, with an organic orientation, also provide technical assistance under the Conservation Stewardship Program?
Well, again, if they have expertise in the area that, let's say someone wants to put in a hedgerow under the Conservation Stewardship Program, if you are approved as a TSP to help them develop hedgerows, then yes, of course you can. The Conservation Activity Plan 138 is under EQIP. And so you're not really recommending CSP activities under EQIP, but there might be times when the farmer meets the Conservation Stewardship Program requirements more than they meet the EQIP, and so that would be a discussion with the farmer on what they which program they might want to apply for, as far as they might decide to do cover crops under EQIP, but do hedgerows under CSP.
Thanks.
So having familiarity with those programs is useful, but in your CAP 138, you wouldn't necessarily be talking about CSP there. That would be more of a one-on-one with the farmer.
Here's a couple of quick ones, like what does it cost for the trainings? It is free once you get accessed and authenticated, so I'll answer that quickly for you. This is probably a more harder one, and maybe
but I want to just, there is those on trainings, the various states, and it really depends on the states. I know in Iowa they have like a 4-day training, and I think it's about $400 or $500. Wisconsin had some trainings here where the cost was about $100. So it really depends on a state-by-state level.
So you're talking about the in-person, though, not necessarily the modules online. Those are free.
Right. All the modules are free. Everything on the computer is free. And at times, too, if you can get NRCS personnel to help you learn Russell 2, some of those trainings might be free as well. But then the extension might put on a training on how to use Russell 2, and those might have a cost. But typically they try to keep the cost down because they really do want to have more people with the expertise and skill in these programs and in conservation planning. So
there was a few.
Everything web-based is free. You can download Russell 2 for free. All those things are free.
Okay, it just says, I know this is just a clarification, but there was a little confusion about getting e-verified. Some people want to, do we register to start this online, or do we actually have to go to an NRCS office, or both?
It's both. You start out by filling out an application, and then the very last thing, you can't get into AgLearn until you get activated. So you go through the authentication process, and then the final thing you have to do, and I believe there's and I don't know if Dana's on the line, there's a time frame. It's 2 or 3 weeks after you've done your web-based application that then you have to go into an NRCS office with a picture ID, and then they activate you, and then you are allowed to get into AgLearn to get to those modules. So it's both.
Where is there, this is kind of a generic question, but where is there demand for this work? You kind of implied everywhere, but are there specific places where there is higher demand?
Well, I would say that the Northeast, the Upper Midwest, and the West Coast, where you saw the higher concentrations of organic farms on those maps that I showed you. But I know, too, that the Mid-Atlantic has some need. There have been a lot of farmers who've been turned away from doing this organic activity plan right at their district offices because there was no TSP in the state to do the plans. And so we don't even really know how many plans we could have written because nobody even applied because they were told that there was nobody there to write the plans. So I would say once you get started, the opportunities will be there, and then the district and the state NRCS people can actually advertise that if you are interested in transitioning to organic, we have someone in our state who can do this for you. I know here in Wisconsin, at one point, we had 60 plans that were unwritten. But I can't say what other states have.
Okay, I could keep going. I'll go a little bit longer here. There's a question about, I guess this is getting a little bit more programmatic, but maybe it has to do with back to this demand question. I think folks are a little bit, are EQIP, and even for that matter CSP, available to all certified and transitioning farms? I guess the question here really is more about transitioning farms. The CAP 138 seems to be only for, I believe is actually only for transitioning farms, and so is there something else for the certified farm that's already in terms of needing technical assistance, besides
Well,
the CAP
and the
itself?
answer to that is yes. So they can't get a CAP 138 for transitioning to organic because they're already organic. But if they, let's say they have been growing rye as a cover crop, and then they want to add vetch to it, so they're actually improving on that, they could get cost share under EQIP for doing that enhanced cover crop. But if they're already doing a legume, let's say they already do clover, well then they're not really enhancing just by adding vetch. They're already doing a leguminous cover crop in their rotation. So there are, EQIP is for practices that the farmer is not currently doing. The I in EQIP stands for incentive. So that is to encourage people to try something new. That's what it's all about. And then the hope is that even after they no longer are receiving cost share, they will see the benefits of it and will continue doing that practice. So this is to kind of encourage farmers to try something new, try something beneficial, and hopefully they will see those benefits and continue. So an organic farmer, let's say, doesn't have any beneficial insect habitat on their farm and wants to put that in, well, then they can go and put that in. And having someone who's got organic background would be very useful because at this time, some practices that include a seeding might, the job sheet might even suggest use of herbicide in order to plant that field border. And of course, if that's certified organic land, then the farmer is, the organic farmer can't do that. So finding a TSP with organic expertise is going to help them put in some of the practices that may not be there may not be knowledge, let's say, at the district office on how to do it organically, but then they might turn them over to a TSP with organic expertise.
That's interesting here. One of the other questions was perhaps, and this gets a little bit to that, is, and I'm sure it's coming from the organic certified or inspection side, is liability. If I'm a TSB and I'm an organic TSB, let's say, with that orientation, and say I make a mistake in a recommendation that might, there's an issue of liability. I guess there are some people concerned, will I get in trouble if I make a recommendation that causes somebody to lose their certification? I probably isn't an easy answer to that, but
I would say probably not, because unless you're doing, let's say, well, it might be an issue like the previous example where you were helping them put in a field border. But typically that field border is not going to be a crop that they're going to harvest and sell as organic anyway. But under the CAP 138, you are not overseeing the practices that they're doing. You're just making suggestions for the practices. So it's really going to be up to the farmer to make the choices, and hopefully you as the TSP will instill in them the necessity to verify that all inputs and activities are acceptable with their certifier before they do them.
Okay, thank you. I know there's more, and I guess that's a good time to. We do need to end here today, and I want to make sure that in November 15th we're going to continue, and this is kind of a series. So if you want to join us, Harriet's going to come back in January after the big Moses conference, which always takes them a lot of work and energy, which I recommend you all attending wherever you are in the United States. It's one of the best conferences on organic agriculture ever. And that she'll be coming back in January. But coming up in just 2 weeks, Katie from MOFGA, the main group, has actually been doing CAP plans, is going to be, and so she'll actually get down now more to some details about what these plans actually look like, and she's actually going to give real world examples of these. then Harriet's going to actually do that too. And then there's a whole wildlife and conservation diversity aspect to this that might be also interesting, because just because you're an organic farm, you might still be interested in wildlife and wildlife enhancements, because NRCS is a lot about wildlife. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and again thank Harriet for her time, and thank you all for attending.
Bye.
Bye.